This week on the Three Rings podcast.
Should auditions be paid?
Are these auditions, self-tapes, actually crucially necessary to find the right talent?
By having those auditions, you create a scene.
They should be paying for that knowledge, not paying for the process.
Welcome to the 12th episode of the Three Rings podcast. My name's Stuart Bishop. I'm here with my fellow director, Bailey J. Muir.
Before we dive into today's video, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button, and turn on your notification bell so you know all about next week's episode.
This week's topics are auditions work? We ask this question and debate whether performers should be paid for auditions. We'll be going over the Jo Koy Golden Globes drama, with Bailey asking if comedians should be hired as award show hosts. And finally, my Audible 2023 stats are in. We chat about what I've listened to and the benefits of Audible learning. Firstly, Bailey, Happy New Year. Can you believe it is 2024 already?
Honestly, mate, the years fly by, don't they? Happy New Year to you too. Happy New Year to everyone out there. Thanks for watching us for another year.
Yes. Happy New Year to our ever-growing audience. So, as you know, we started this last year and we want to have, fun topics and sometimes controversial topics. And I think today's one is one of those topics which I don't know whether people really want it to be a topic and for people to talk about this. It's, should auditions be paid? Now, Bailey, why are we talking about this today?
So there's a growing movement in the US market called Auditions Work. Really recommend anyone watching who's involved in the arts to go and check it out. There's a website called auditionswork.org. There's all sorts on there. There's some of it that's very much nuanced to the US with their SAG-AFTRA contracts. However, there's terms within there and sort of the points they're making very much apply to ourselves in the UK and the general worldwide entertainment scene. Now, auditions are obviously something which has always been an unpaid thing and has kind of been tracked as the performer's job interview, so to speak. However, there's definitely an argument to be posed as to how similar is an audition or a casting or a self-tape to a job interview. Couple of examples I like to use, first of all, is if you go to Tesco for a job interview to stack shelves, they're not going to ask you to stack shelves in that job interview. In your audition, they do ask you to dance to potentially get a dance role. And in a similar sense, let's take this now as freelancers. When you want a building company to come and build a house for you, you're not going to get 10 companies to come and build a little wall in your garden to then pick which wall is best, so they'll go, right, you're commissioned to build the whole house. So there's something there which doesn't quite feel consistent with going, this is our version of a job interview. It is different, and I think there's room to have more of a conversation around it. What's your take on it, Stuart? I mean, you've got a way more historical sense of auditions always being this way as well. I think it's easier to challenge now in a world that auditions maybe aren't as common as they used to be. So it'd be interesting to hear where you would take it.
Well, I think you take the words out of my mouth there. I think to put it into some historical content, auditions have changed. The whole concept of auditions seems to have just gone out the window. No one seems to think it's that important anymore. And it's like they've kind of disappeared, to be honest. It's turned into more self-taping, which I know we're gonna talk about in a second, the more self-tape aspect of it. But it used to be, so when I was a dancer, I would go into central London every day because I knew there would be 4 or 5 auditions in a day. I could pick the ones I wanted to go to, and they would be a mixture of ones who'd been sent by your agent, private ones, and open ones. And as well as that, there'd be castings to go to, and you would gate crash because you would see everyone out auditioning. Now, it was kind of starting to die off anyway before the pandemic. Not die off, but I think auditions, with the introduction of new technology and self-taping, I think there was more of a call to lessen, we don't need so many auditions. We don't need to, but what people don't understand is by having those auditions, you create a scene. From creating a scene, you create more competition because people are seeing and they're seeing the opportunity in front of them. I think that's the most important thing. When I go to an audition, I can see, right, I've got to really, take away the hidden factors that you don't know about, the fact that the person next to you is friends with the choreographer or whatever other politics. There was that real chance that you could see, if I do well here, I could get the job. And I'm trying to link this. I don't know why I've sort of said that like that, but I think so. I think it's important for people to know the difference between now, because now going through the pandemic, you don't see the opportunities as much, especially through self-taping. And it seems like there are far less work. So if you are going to an audition, it feels like it's going to be even busier than it would have been, and you would have less chance. And it's like there isn't then another audition to go to that day.
I think that's the key.
It is the key. So you're losing out on basically a day. Because by the time you go in, and majority of people now aren't living in central London anymore. It's not, and most performers now are living sort of on the outskirts or even out of London. So what I think I'm trying to say here, it's a big effort on behalf of a performer to go in just for an hour's audition, maybe.
That's it. I think it definitely is that fact that there isn't a scene anymore that's almost like opened the space for this to be a conversation. Because when you were, like, when I hear stories about like the early 2000s of the industry, when you were all just in Pineapple every day and you could finish an audition, go upstairs and just drop in another one. It's like, in that world, you wouldn't have minded half as much because there's so many opportunities around that it wouldn't feel as much like you're going out of your way. Whereas now, like, the rarity of an audition is very much the case that when you need to go to Pineapple for that audition, it may be the only time that week that you're going. So it actually is... It's weird to say because it feels like that demands more because they're going only for that audition. Even though you could argue that actually the 2000s scene demanded more because they were there all day, every day. It's a hard distinction, but I definitely think the change is what's opened the room for the conversation. Now, I'd be interested to just push you a little bit more down the historical route to try and figure out whether an audition could be paid for or not. What I naturally look to is like recalls are commonly paid for in a casting. Would you know when like that came around for recalls to be paid historically?
This is going back, the end of the 90s, start of the noughties. I remember recalls being every now and again, if it was a good job, the recall would be paid. So it's been going on for a hell of a long time. I guess you've got to look at also the value of the job that you are auditioning for, because if it's only a music video and you're then having to go do an audition, which sometimes auditions can take long because they have callbacks and they ask you to come back later on, and because people sometimes production companies, they lose their whole sight of they're using that audition as promotional or marketing material and stuff like that for future content. So it's just not worth it if you are auditioning and the job's a one-day shoot. Now, if the shoot is a one-day shoot and you're being paid 10 grand, then perhaps you don't mind so much. However, you're going to probably come at me here with, well, it shouldn't matter how much it is. It should be based around maybe how many people are auditioning and what actual chance you've got.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there is a conversation around how much chance you've got, which kind of links into what we've said before with actually too many people are seen for castings. And I think that could possibly one of be the biggest reasons why auditions aren't paid, because they see too many people to be able to do that, which needs to be tackled as its own separate issue to maybe then allow this one to be solved as well. But what I would then say, going into like a value of the job and trying to translate that to kind of a value that you should be paid for that audition, where I naturally go is like, even if it's like a 1-day music video, if you've got to travel out to Barcelona to shoot that music video, you're going to get paid a travel day fee, which is like 50% of your BSF. I don't understand why that isn't exactly the same, if not more, for the audition. Because obviously that travel day, you're paid to sit on a plane for the sake of the client asking you to do that means you've missed out on a day of potential paid work. Where's the difference with a client asking you to come and audition is them making you miss out on a potential day of missed work? I don't really see a difference there. I can't see how it's not obvious that should be paid for.
It's going against the tradition, isn't it? It's this model that's been created by out of work creatives originally. Well, we'll need to audition for it, and create. It's like somewhere down the line, someone created it I don't know, maybe for their own promotion. Oh, well, I'll do an audition for you, but it's, the more we talk about it, the more I'm thinking it's crazy, because you were giving those examples of if you go to, I don't know, there is no interview where, well, I mean, I'm sure there are examples of things where you'd have to show some, I don't know.
So in a normal job, this is again interesting. If you went to Tesco for a job interview, there may be a scenario you are asked to go and stock the shelves, but that would be a trial shift, and you get paid for that trial shift. I think an audition is a trial shift, to be honest.
I don't think anyone wants to hear this argument.
For sure. See, it's one of these things, it's like an uneasy conversation to have, isn't it? Because there's plenty of people out there who won't like it, and they're the ones that would have to pay for it. Because, again, another uneasy avenue to go down with this is even like asking how effective is an audition. For example, if I take this as us as an agency, some of the most minor jobs we've done have had an audition to be able to get the job, and some of the highest profile jobs we've done, there's been no audition, no self-tapes, they've just been cast on images and showreels.
And recommendation.
Yes. And if the most important jobs can go that way, then why can't everything? Because, I mean, I don't think we'd be crossing any boundaries saying this. Like, we've worked with the BBC and never had to do a casting process. That job went super to plan, they were super happy. So if it can work on that level, I think it really poses a question as to, are these auditions, self-tapes, actually crucially necessary to find the right talent? Is the actual material, showreels, images, CV, not enough on its own?
Brings into question again, which we've spoke about before, the usefulness of a casting director and how much work they should actually be doing, and whether they're putting their work in sort of the wrong places. We've talked about, casting directors at the very, very top. They're not going to bring to Steven Spielberg 100 recommendations. They're expected to know who the top actors are and to know, who it shouldn't take them, right, okay, this is the film, right, let me get back to you after 6 weeks of casting and trying to find the right people. It should be, I know these people, I know the ones who, I know a selection who will be correct for this, and it's then sort of coming down to a performing arts casting level and asking, is it part of a role that could actually be minimalised so much that maybe auditions and casting are being hammed up to fill out a casting director role at the performing arts level, which possibly maybe isn't even needed?
I think that knowledge of the industry is a real key point as well. Because sometimes where my mind sways trying to justify it is like on like the acting scene with like Hollywood. Of course, they're gonna know the star name actors and know who to put to Steven Spielberg. But then the ones that may just have like one line in the film, my mind sometimes sways to why would they know those actors? Maybe they do need to have a casting process for that because there's such a vast amount of them. But then I equally go, you've got to be an expert on your industry. A general member of public could identify who should be the lead role in the next Marvel film. An actual casting director who's meant to be an expert on the industry should, in my mind, be able to do it to the level of this is a great person to do that single line in the film. Because when I compare this to like the dance space, I don't think the difference of those, I don't want to call them lower level actors, but the actors that wouldn't be the like star name casting, I don't think there's that many more of them than there are dancers. And I could very confidently cast basically any job in the dance world off the top of my head. And that's not just using our own dancers. I could easily do that with a list of dancers that we don't represent. You should have that level of knowledge if you're going to pitch yourself as the casting expert. I'm sure I could confidently do that with dance. Probably not even needing to watch the show reels and see the images because I just know from being around. They should be paying for that knowledge, not paying for the process.
I don't think not that the argument's out there at the moment, it doesn't seem. Do you know what I mean? There is this case, but how strong this is being pushed, I don't know. Simply because I don't think it's performers doesn't know about it, and they would go, "Oh no, that's too radical." Maybe they would think it's too radical to be paid for having to fucking come out your house and do work. But you don't mind if you know if you're being asked, can you prepare this? And they say, yeah, it's out of you and three others, let's say, you don't mind because you can see that chance that you have. But if you're being asked to go and audition or do a self-tape and you've seen it out on Spotlight, it's being sent to like a million casting agents, should I say. You shouldn't be asked to do anything really when you've got literally no chance of getting it. Talk to me about just before we were in our pre-meeting when we were going through topics, you said about self-production costs could have been flipped.
Yeah, self-tapes. I feel like the production cost of that filmed version of the audition has been flipped, and it pre-pandemic it was on the client or the casting team, and now it's the performers who foot the bill. And where I'm saying this is self-tapes did exist before the pandemic, but they were relatively uncommon. Now it's like, I'd say self-tapes are now more common than an actual audition is. And this is coming with more and more real detailed heavy demands of, we need professional quality camera, we need an absolutely clean white backdrop, we need exactly this camera angle. And it's like, whoa, calm down. These people are filming on their phones in their living room. They don't all have the same space. They can't get you this exact inch by inch measurement of a shot. Calm down with the demands. And where I said the cost has been flipped, so before the pandemic, I think this still happens in the audition rooms anyhow, but when you went to an audition, when you went to a casting, there would often be someone in the corner with the camera set up who would be filming, pressing record. That camera is paid for by either the client or the casting, not sure which. Sure, that person hitting the button is getting paid. They're obviously paying for the studio you're doing it in. Now it's all flipped. Now the dancer or the performer has to have the camera and the backdrop and be the person turning it on and off and supply the studio space. Especially if you want to go at it to the level of some of the demands you get, it would literally be hiring a studio, getting professional quality mics,
Don't forget, I was going to say editing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, editing costs. It's everything that the client paid for to record that pre-pandemic is now flipped. and the performer pays for everything. So it's almost the performer is paying for the opportunity to be seen, which is where I like to compare it to. It is like the lottery. Some people say it's not like the lottery because you don't pay for the opportunity. When you consider that with the production costs, I'd argue you are paying for the opportunity.
I can tell you now, the very few times over the last few years where you've tried to talk me into, look, Stuart, there's an old man role, yeah. I would much prefer to go to an audition and them see me and get my personality and get the feel for it, and than a self-tape where, because there's been a couple of times where you've said, look, if you want to do this, you need to do this self-tape, and the stress that as a non, I suppose, if you're doing it every day, you're probably not as going to be stressed and you've got it all set up. But for me, I mean, there was one where you said I had to dance like a this or dance like a bloody, I don't know what it was I had to dance like, but I was doing it and I was just like, oh, I feel the lighting, this, and I looked it back and I was like, oh, I'm not, oh God. And it was just a stress, it was. And it shouldn't be a stress. It shouldn't be, if you go into a job interview, it's on the onus for not only for you to give a good impression, but for the people that they're trying to advertise to you. Well, look, this would be a great place to come to work. It doesn't feel like there's the split sort of accountability or responsibility or sharing that kind of love when it comes to auditions or self-tapes, especially. Self-tapes, it's just, here you go. And it's like they say, thanks.
This is something I always thought. I was like, coming to the point of like retiring from being a performer during the pandemic. So I've like had a lot of those self-tapes when it first started to come in. And I'm like, I always enjoyed the audition room. Like, I've got a very competitive nature, so that is very naturally me anyhow, which I think also comes with actually having an environment to perform in. But I can't think of an audition I've ever been to that I didn't enjoy. Flip end, I can't think of a single self-tape I ever did that I enjoyed. It's so different. I know exactly what you mean with that, where it's just the stress. And I think because you're just like doing it on your own at home as well, it like almost doesn't feel real. Do you know what I mean with that? It's like when you turn up to the studio, like, you're there to audition. When I'm just like filming like in my living room, I'm like, I know I can do this on a limited amount of times. I don't even know if it's going to get watched because I can't see a panel in front of me. It almost always felt meaningless.
We're just talking about our inconveniences. We're not talking we haven't really even dived into sort of the true statistics of financials and things like that. And I think there's so much more we could go on here. But for now, without any type of major defense of why auditions should be paid by potentially someone we could get on from this organization, I think auditions should be paid.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's obvious. Just one more point to throw as well before we move on that's just come to me there. In pointing out that where like the doubt of, is this going to be watched because the panel isn't set in front of you? So also just made me think, are self-tapes limiting the growth of performers? Because I also, which I've never thought of before, when you go to an audition, you can judge the panel's reaction. I would always be able to come out going, yeah, they enjoyed that. I think I've got a good chance of a recall. Or come out going, yeah, they didn't like that. I need to rethink how I played that for future. With a self-tape, you never hear anything and you don't even see a reaction that you can break down and try and pick apart to learn from. So it's like, actually, we're not even giving the opportunity for them to work out for themselves how they could grow and improve.
See, with auditions, you grow anyway because of the not only you might get feedback from the panel, but and you might get feedback because you've gone into the next round, perhaps, or you got to the end, or you got the job. And it's obvious because you're dancing right next to people, so you can see who your competition is and that. But even just with castings, when you go in and you don't see what the other person has done before, you get a sense of, if you see people in the reception, and if someone comes in looking all swish and looking good and loads of energy, that might make you think, God, I need to get I need to get more sleep. I need to be more confident. I need to be whatever it is. It's just, it's tricky because people might argue, well, there's less auditions now, so you're being asked to do much less than you were. If you were going to make this argument, it should have been years ago. But I don't know. I think we're both in agreement that it should be paid, but I think we need to delve into it more to find out how that could happen. Yeah, there is so much more, because I know that we've spoken in before about creating budget on every job for the audition process, but it would need to be much smaller. I can feel that you've got about a million things to say on that, but we need to. Let's go on, because it comes down to financials, doesn't it?
Absolutely, that's it. In the current audition scene, it'd be impossible to do. But as we've covered before, there's so many more issues with the audition scene to be tackled that actually audition scene in a perfect model, it is financially viable.
It's thinking out the box, which we've talked about regarding musical theatre box office sales, and how the performing arts can make more money from different things, just thinking more creatively, basically. Right, let's go on. So, wow, Jo Koy. First of all, it's the first time I've ever heard of him. Jo Koy, the comedian, did the opening monologue for the Golden Globes. Bailey, what was your opinion on it?
I mean, it was just shocking, wasn't it? Like, what had been wrote for him to perform was obviously just completely the wrong content for that environment. Although, also, I would say, I don't know if it's even that it's the wrong content for that environment, as just it was just plainly wrong content. I don't know if there's a place you can put that is actually funny. But the more it went on, it just became more and more of a car crash, didn't it? Like, not only the disrespect of the films that he's there to sort of present and the stars and all of that, but then also the way it turned into his own writers. I know that was a big observation you made, Stuart, wasn't it? Like, how did you feel about that when he started to throw his writers under the bus?
I mean, when he started to bomb, and then he said, "Oh, actually, I was given." What he said?
He said he was given 10 days' notice.
10 days, 10 bloody days. I mean, if you were given 10 days notice, saying that you could do so much in 10 days. Yes, I get it. If it's a boxing or it's a football, or but it's still 10 days. Yeah. And then he admits to, oh, well, actually, my writers wrote a lot of this, so don't blame me. It was just, oh man, it was just shockingly bad. It wasn't that funny, and it then begs the question, which I think was the whole point of this topic. But after this, I want to then talk about the differences between, obviously, a much more sort of popular Golden Globes host in Ricky Gervais. But the question is, should comedians be hosting award shows? Why are you asking this?
I just feel like having a comedian presenting an award show is almost like a conflict of intentions. Because obviously, let's take the Golden Globes, for example. Your whole intention there is to present an award show about the best films of the year. So you should be there celebrating the films and saying how well they've done. But as a comedian, you're employed to get up there and take the piss out of those films, which seems completely the opposite objective of that award show. And I think this is putting comedy in the right environment. It's on their own stand-up tour, they're well within their rights to stand there and take the piss out of a film that's just come out. And that would potentially be funny in that environment. But I think, And I think what I'm kind of touching on is there's a difference between a comedian and a host. I feel like the host should be there to, like, as I said, literally celebrate the film, give the statistics, what's been the big box office seller, what's had the critical acclaim, what have audiences loved. Give the real facts and figures of what makes these films great. And even on, I guess, kind of like a punditry level, like a commentary on what the great scenes were and what made that so good, the great acting performances. I feel like the presenter should be making a celebration of that, which is fitting to the event.
Because I can hear people saying, "No, you're missing the point, Bailey. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be." But are you, so hence what I'm asking, are you just being a killjoy? Are you just saying this for the sake of it? But there is an argument that if it's not funny, what's the point?
And especially in that environment, I think it's very hard for that comedy to be fun. Because your objective is literally to, like, stand there and take the piss out of your audience. So it's never going to be fun for the people receiving those awards. I feel like comedy in that setting actually naturally creates a negative, not enjoyable environment.
Do you think it's because there isn't any well-known hosts? So, for example, there are no well-known hosts, but for example, years ago, Billy Crystal used to always host the Oscars. He hosted the Oscars for years, he did. And you got used to his style. It's a bit like Graham Norton with the Eurovision. You get used to, and you learn to like the host, because you know that they're going to give information, and it's not about them.
I think there's a style of comedy with it as well. Because if you take a host like Ant and Dec, they are actually a comedic host, but it's still a host. Like when they do Britain's Got Talent, they don't take the piss out of the acts. They have separate jokes about society that they manage to weave into the show. I think when you hire a literal comedian as the host, they're just going there to try and do a stand-up comedy set about films, which doesn't suit the environment.
I think, you see, when you're talking about filmmaking, or you're talking about the actual art of something, really you need a host who is an expert on those subjects. Now, are we saying this simply because Jo Koy I'm sure he's a great comedian, but in my eyes, it just failed on every level. So I have to compare him with, obviously, the celebrated Golden Globes sort of hosting years of Ricky Gervais. I think he did it twice or even 3 times, maybe. And when I said this yesterday, when we were planning this topic, you said, which was interesting, actually, he wasn't. He was possibly less popular in the room than Jo Koy. Because a lot of Jo Koy's sort of jokes, some of them were kind of missed the point, or not, were off, weren't funny, and some were just sort of general. They were very safe jokes, but just general, just rubbish, basically. Where Ricky Gervais, his stuff was just so, everything was just, gag after gag after gag, and it was like, for someone to do it in that style, Ricky Gervais came in at the top and started it, and there it should have finished.
And I think that there's also an issue here with what audience are you playing up for? Are you playing for the live audience in front of you, or are you playing for the televised audience? Because I also feel very sorry for some of the actors and actresses at the Golden Globes. Like, for example, if Margot Robbie has to get up and accept an award show that she's just been taking the piss out of for the public's enjoyment, it feels completely wrong to me. That's meant to be a celebration of their work. It should be about them. And if the public want to tune in, it should be because they enjoyed these people having this moment that they're recognised. I don't think it should be this mass media thing that actually we're just trying to get viewing numbers. I think it should be back to the facts of what like stuff like the Golden Globes was originally made for. It was made to celebrate the work, not to be a TV spectacle. I think it's aligning back with that. The people in the room should be able to enjoy it. And that's where like the Ricky Gervais thing, like, it's kind of an iconic pop culture thing. A lot of the public love it. But I still don't think it was appropriate for the environment. He could do exactly the same thing on his stand-up tour and it'd be like, that, it'd be okay. People can laugh at that. But doing it in that environment, like, why have you gone out and attacked the audience that you're meant to be celebrating? It doesn't make sense. I think ultimately it's just a bad hire.
I think people watching this might think we're being killjoys, you know, and being thinking, you know, we're making this up just for the sake of having a podcast topic, which we are obviously, but it you know, it has to work. And when it doesn't work, you've got to look at, well, is the format tired? Is it, you know, if you're a football team, you don't keep playing the same tactics if you're losing. You try and change it up. And it's like, no one's going to do it better than Ricky Gervais. And no one actually, it's like Ricky Gervais, he doesn't care, where I think this Jo Koy will really care about what's happened here, and possibly will he ever be, you know, is that his peak? Will he ever get more famous than this week or last week, whenever it was? So
just to come back on you saying like people might take it as us being like killjoys as well. I think there's a conversation there around like, are we in an era that the public struggles to enjoy people just being successful and getting rewarded? And is that why we have to take it to comedy? Because if you go back 50 years, it didn't need comedy because people would actually just enjoy people receiving the recognition that they deserve. And I'm not sure how much that actually works in today's world. I'm not sure if positivity can be enjoyed.
I think you're going down a slippery slope of a rabbit hole there.
Well,
you know,
maybe.
Simpler lives, simpler brains, I think. You know, back in the day, we looked at these people as you know, as movie stars. Do you know what I mean? As glitz and glamour, as, wow, look at these elegant women in these amazing ball gowns and dresses. Look at these debonair men, you know, Cary Grant and Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton and, you know, and Brad Pitt, you know, and now you know, Robert Redford, these kind of classic people. Now it feels like...
I feel like we've lost track of the fact that they are people. I feel like the public 50 years ago cared about not only Marilyn Monroe's work, but Marilyn Monroe's life. Now, I don't think well, some people do, but I don't think the general consensus of the public actually stops to compute how Margot Robbie may be feeling about that, which I'm really glad to see with this controversy actually has been the case. So I think that's what's often lacking, looking at those stars now and seeing how they will feel, not just using them at the expense of entertainment.
I don't think people look at them the same anymore. So it's now cool to take the piss out of celebrities, where before you wouldn't even thought of that. You know, it wasn't in our culture just to take the piss out of people in general.
I feel like we've lost track of the actual fact that to become a celebrity, you have to be successful. I think they've become this just like little internet group that we forget about. Like I kind of say, we forget the fact that they actually have a life. It's like they're an internet creation.
People like Daniel Day-Lewis, for example, who don't do interviews, are not on social media. Whenever they do something, they're celebrated so much because it's about their craft. And really, an award show at the very highest level should be celebrating the craft of whatever the awards are for. Now, as you start to bring the value and the importance of whatever award show it is, the more people are going to just take the piss. You know, you've got the Oscars, you've got the Emmys and the Globes. Are they the same thing, the Golden Globes and the Emmys? No, yeah, they're different. And then underneath, you've then got like your TV soap awards and shit like that, you know? reality TV awards, porn awards, Raspberry awards, whatever it is. So it's like years ago, I don't remember there being so many awards, but now there's always awards on. GQ awards, Man of the Year awards, Bum of the fucking Year awards. They've got awards for everything. And funnily enough, I remember saying to my mate, he was saying to me about, oh, look at this investment. You should invest in this. Look, they've won loads of awards. And I had to explain to him, because it's not common knowledge, that majority awards are paid for by the companies or the individuals who are actually winning these awards. Like it's all part of one big awards scam. Even the Oscars, you have to campaign. You can't just be put up for it and do nothing. You've got to work for it to get those awards. So
I feel like as well, like that commentary of an award show, like what the host does, should also be like a translator of the knowledge to help the public understand and appreciate the art form. Because compare it to football, the reason they will get ex-footballers on as pundits is to break down the game, to translate it to the fans, so the fans actually understand tactics and all of these different play roles and stuff like that. I feel like an award show should be the same thing. It should really establish what makes this art great. And it also makes me think, is that a reason that we've moved away from proper art? For example, there's a classic quote from I think it's Martin Scorsese, who describes the Marvel films as being like the film version of a film fair. They're not actually cinema. They're just a spectacle. And there's definitely a point in that when then you go back to a film like The Godfather, it's so different. That is actually artistically great.
Well, it's again, people people don't want to watch quality, because quality, you can't just go bang, here's quality. It's like do you remember when Andor was on Disney Plus? Well, it still is on Disney Plus. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Andor, amazing series. Now the whole thing about that was, at the start, it's a bit slow, but if you kept with it, the slowness gave you a better experience at the end. It's a bit like Game of Thrones. Everyone loved Game of Thrones. When did they stop loving it? When suddenly it was rushed at the end on bits, on sort of, we were being told to, that people could go across a whole country in one episode, where before it would take a whole season. So you're getting it. Why am I linking this? I don't know. I've lost my train of thought. I think it's, we're not getting the quality. That's what it is. And people don't want to sit through, and they want it laid on a plate straight away. Here it is. Here's the point of it. Here's the good part. Here's, people just, I don't know. They don't want to hear. They don't want to be educated. They want to be entertained. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the flip that's happened. And I think kind of as an entertainment industry, we have a responsibility to try and flip that back the other way again for our own good, because that's what actually allows us to stay alive.
To conclude this, actually, just before concluding, I just wanted to say about the differences between Ricky Gervais and that Jo Koy. Ricky Gervais, that is what he does. And he owned it, and he was confident, and it was, there is a difference between experience and someone who's new, put into a position, who, whether they thought he was going to be a safe bet or what, or I don't know, or if they'd been told, right, well, we want someone who's not going to slag us off as much as Ricky Gervais, well then, don't get someone to do those type of jokes, like you've been saying. Get someone to actually host it properly.
So I would think with Jack Whitehall at the Brit Awards, he comes out with some absolutely hilarious lines, and you will laugh whilst watching it. But I always still sit there with a bit of a thing of how's that person sat in the room that he's just made the joke about going to react? It's just not befitting to the environment. Like with the Golden Globes, Ricky Gervais went out there and did exactly what you expect Ricky Gervais to do. So if you're not happy with it, you've got no one to blame but yourself for making that higher.
I think it's also this whole thing of, at the moment, there is this sort of fashion for multiple hosts as well. So how can these people, they've only got to remember 2 minutes worth of a couple of lines. It's written down on there as well, so you're not getting any type of experts. So at the start, it's like, well, it's become, we're going to have a comedian, and then we're going to have loads of guest hosts and that. But if you're receiving an award for a music award, and it's coming from someone like, I don't know, Joe Wiley, or someone who has a big radio show who gives, years ago it used to be Thingy Peel, Mike Peel, who used to literally, if you had your record on his show, then it was like, it was going to be success. So if you're getting an award from someone who actually is an expert on that field, then it'd feel much better than getting it from, I don't know, Jack Whitehall, or someone who's got no real expertise in what you do.
Another thing with the comedians as well, it's like finding someone who's universal for the audience. So obviously, like a film awards, there's so many varieties and categories of films. You've got a very mixed audience in that room. So I don't know Jo Koy's work enough to really comment, but like Ricky Gervais, that is not universal comedy whatsoever. It works very well in Ricky Gervais's own stuff, his Netflix shows, if he does stand-up, because it's going out to his own audience. I don't feel like that's someone you can put on stage to a universal audience. This is where it's better to go with that like normal host who then is just giving the facts, because everyone there to celebrate movies can celebrate great movies without needing to have a taste in comedy.
I don't think there'd be much in ratings difference whether they had a comedian on at the start or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, so finally, let's finish off today with my Audible. I received an email from Audible, and it was my 2023 stats, it was, of my listening. Now, let me just get it up so we can, where is it? Here it is. So it says you listen like no one else. In 2023, you lit up your imagination 676 times. So that I listened to my audiobook 676 times. How is that possible? For a total of 5,852 minutes, which I worked out is about 97 odd hours. And your longest listening session was 151 minutes on the 5th of March. I hope that wasn't during work time, Stuart. I can't think of what I would have listened to for 151 minutes. Maybe it was a story one, because I find if it's a book that is more information, I can only listen to it in sort of little pockets. But first of all, the reason why I wanted to talk about this was because it's an interesting thing, Audible. I got into it because I wanted to originally add more knowledge learning from just my sitting down reading a book. I read every day, but it has to be at a point when I can, and there can't be anything else, and I'm not doing anything else. I find it very hard to read, traveling on the tube, on the bus, or anything like that. But Audible, to be able to listen, I thought, this is a very easy way to do. To travel and to learn while I'm going or while I'm on the hop. And it's interesting because 5,800 minutes, 97 hours. The way I see that is that I am 97 hours more smarter or cleverer or more full of knowledge than someone who has not listened to Audible at all. What are you thinking, Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a fact, really, hasn't it? And I think there's something about Audible as well that, like, almost enables you to do that more because you can do it in a passive way. For example, like, I will put it on when I'm just, like, going out for a walk. Obviously, you're not going to, like, walk down the street, like, reading a book in your hand. I think it actually makes that way of learning so much more accessible, which is brilliant. And I love that actually as a society we're like finding like different ways to learn as well. Because I'm someone that really struggles reading, and not in a way that actually like I can't read, but I have a very active mind. So when I'm reading something, I'll like consume like one sentence, and then I'll be reading the rest, but I'll actually be thinking about something else whilst reading, and I forget what I've read because I'm thinking about the bit I read before. So I really struggle to actually consume what I'm reading. Whereas with Audible, because it's like speaking to me, I can like think at the same time. So where physically reading, I'm still reading, but it's not going in. Audible, it is going in because I can actually hear it. And for me, like that is the only way I learn. Up until I started using Audible, I weren't someone who particularly would read a lot of books. Audible for me has like completely changed it. And these now like 500,000 page books that I would have never picked up, I've consumed absolutely loads of, and I can probably recite like the most minor details in them. It's great that we've got these alternate tools.
Would you say, I would say you're not completely, but you are from a generation who are surely they're reading less, and they're, you know, and the what is it, 8 second
TikTok generation.
Yeah. Even though you are, would you say you're probably the generation after, wouldn't you? Or like,
yeah, I would be the generation before that. Definitely, yeah. For me, I think it's just how my mind works, to be honest. I don't think it's anything with like attention span. To be honest, I've got like a stupidly big attention span. But reading just doesn't work for me in a physical sense. Like, even if I read out loud, like I'm not one of these people who like you can hear I struggle to read. It's clear as. But I can read you the book and not know what I've just said. I don't really know how to explain it, but having an audio version gives me completely the opposite experience.
Well, it's interesting because that's what you're saying is very, that's, what's the word? Not popular. It's the same as many other people. A lot of people will not necessarily give an excuse of, for a lot of people, there are a lot of people who struggle to read. Who weren't great readers at school, and then they don't read that much in whatever they do, so they struggle to read. And now, because we've got so many things that, if whatever you struggle, there is an app, there is some kind of technology to make sure that you don't. The first ever bit of technology was of course the calculator. It was the start of unlocking people's brains that there could be machines that could do things. I mean, obviously the computer was created before that, but I think in general, everyone gets a calculator first. In my genre, in my era, so in my age, we didn't have computers. We had calculators when we were kids, and then computers came down the line. But to be able to cheat at something, it's like now everything is created to create a hack or a cheat. But some people do struggle with reading, but you cannot give that as an excuse to not to learn.
There's definitely a way to counteract like any problem you have with like learning through new technology. Because it's with like the excuses, like I would be quite confident in saying like 50 years ago, I would not have been able to do my job as an agent. Because stuff like having to read the casting briefs, like I can't do that and pick out the parts. But I have an app on my laptop that I can just press play and it reads the email to me. And then doing that, I can pick out the parts and I know what I'm doing. Without that app, I don't think I'll be able to do what I do now.
There is no reason, I think, for anyone to let any barriers in front of them. And I think the reason why we did this sort of topic was sort of just to show that, you know, it's like reading can be clunky. It can be, you know, maybe your eyes, you know, I know for me, if I read at night, I can't see as well. So audio is just you know, as long as you're not deaf, it's just a perfect thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Stuart, honestly. So before we leave off for today, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button, you must have enjoyed the video if you're still here, and turn on the notification bell so you know about it when we're back next week as well. Thanks for watching today, and we will catch you all next week.